Greetings, I'm Alex Pauk. I'm the music director, founder of the Esprit Orchestra, and conductor as well. And I'm here with Erica Goodman, harpist extraordinaire, Esprit's principal harpist, in her lovely home. We wanted to give you a perspective on a piece that I wrote at Erica's request. It's a concerto for harp and orchestra. Erica will demonstrate a little bit of it, but I'll give you some idea of what I had in mind in writing the work. The Concerto for Harp and Orchestra draws on diverse talents that Erica and I both share in terms of our wide-ranging experience with different kinds of music. So in this piece, you'll hear new music techniques, but you'll also hear jazz elements. I composed the harp part on its own first, and then brought the orchestra in to embrace it, to accompany what was already in place as a harp part. The first movement, called Floating World, has musical phrases that kind of start by getting thrown in the air, so to speak, and then they float down. And part of what happens in the midst of that is, along with notes being played in a normal way, there are harmonics, which are fine-sounding higher notes with a clarity of tone. And these are echoed a little bit in the percussion section of the orchestra. So Erica, perhaps.
First of all, we should demonstrate what a harmonic is.
Yeah.
Harmonics are really created by dividing the string in half. So let's say we have the normal sound of the string. I have to put my hand on the string in a special way, and I divide the string and play at the same time, and it will sound an octave higher. And not only does it sound an octave higher, but it has a very special bell-like quality to it as well. But in this movement, the harmonics are quite high up, and they're rather hard to achieve, so this is what it sounds like. So it has, it's quieter, and maybe it even has a little thud in the sound, which sort of provides an accent to it, and that's what's happening in this piece.
Why don't you play the first phrase
First few
or
bars.
a few phrases where that idea of the floating comes in,
Okay.
and then there's some harmonics in different places.
So first movement, Floating World. Of course, without the orchestra, which adds a lot to it.
Yes. Yeah. The other thing that happens in this piece is I've written chromatically for the harp, which is an unusual thing in that it requires that you do certain things with your foot pedals.
That's right.
And that does certain things with the strings.
That's right, because the harp isn't naturally a chromatic instrument. It's not like the piano, which has the black and white keys. We, in a way, have to create the black and white keys by using the 7 pedals. And each pedal has 3 positions: flat, natural, and sharp. And this, for instance, is the D pedal on this side. And it works all the Ds at the same time. So every D is flat, every D is natural, and now every D is sharp. But the trick is, if I have to play D natural and C sharp, D natural and D flat at the same time, I have to use C sharp. I can't play, I can't use the same string, so I have to use a different string. So this is called enharmonics. And we use enharmonics on the harp all the time to get into different keys. But the good news is that the fingering for every scale is the same. providing you have the right pedals. So these pedals are connected through rods that extend through the column here to a series of discs. There are two sets of discs. The open string is flat, for instance. And then when the first group come into play, there's a little disc with a little fork. Here it is, moving. When I push the pedal, F natural, and then the bottom set, here we go, F sharp. And every string has two of these discs, because we go from the open string flat and to natural with the first group applying, and then to sharp when the second group pinches. So, of course, going through this harp are some 3,000 or so parts, all hidden from view under this brass setup over here.
So now I'll mention the second movement. It's called riffs. And riffs are usually in jazz. They're short bursts of melodies that are sometimes repeated, or they keep resurfacing. And they're in this movement, they kind of jostle with each other. The movement is kind of a kaleidoscopic effect with riffs in the harp, and then these are tossed around and repeated in the orchestra, reflected upon in the orchestra. So this is kind of very jagged elements, and demonstrates the use of the pedal, which Erica will explain to you, the pedals on the harp.
So we're going to show the usage of the pedals, lots of pedals, in the second movement of the concerto, which is called Riffs. So I'll play an excerpt from that right now. So I should just say here that a pedal slide is where I play the note, but I leave it ring while I change the pedal. It's a kind of a jazzy effect. So I have to do that, you probably heard it go by, in the second bar of this excerpt. And that what I find interesting about this movement is that the right and left hand are doing completely different things, and with different kinds of rhythms too that have to match, because the right hand is like 16ths and dotted eighths and everything, but then there are triplets in the left hand that have to fit into the right hand. And the dynamic emphasis in the left hand, it's almost like a bass player would play, because it's very loud, jagged, everything, whereas the right hand is softer and more, a little bit more melodic. So these two things have to kind of match with each other. So I'll play the first few bars now and demonstrate that.
That's it.
And a couple of pedal slides in there on purpose, just to add to the jazziness of it, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the thing is that the orchestra also has some pulsing elements against which these elements, the harp elements, are emphasized as being syncopated. So you can't hear all the syncopations in the harp alone. You have to combine them to get the full jazzy effect. Anyways, it's tumbling along, these phrases. Now, for the third movement, it's called Embrace. And this is a movement where the harp, again, has kind of floating chords that are produced by single notes being climbing single notes. But what happens in the orchestra is that that line of the harp music is embraced by the strings at the beginning, particularly. And what happens is that as each harp note comes in, a string section plays the same note and holds on to it while more notes are being added. So there's a continual blurring of chords that are set up by the harp. So the harp sets the chords up, but as strings enter, they continue blurring while new chords begin. So maybe, Erica, you could play just the ascending lines that happen.
I would like to also add to this, harp-wise, that this movement kind of demonstrates what the harp does naturally in the most beautiful way that no other instrument can quite match. Most of the rest of the piece is doing things that the harp doesn't naturally do. As I say, even though there aren't really extended techniques, we're not making odd sounds and playing with the fingernails like this with those things like that, and we're not doing nail glissandi, and we're not doing all these other things.
I'd like to point out, in fact, that in writing this piece, I purposely avoided all the glissandi that you normally hear and all the flashy, exuberant splashes of pyrotechnics, so to speak.
But I think this one movement kind of demonstrates what the harp does really, really well, and that is where, because the sustain is what the harp does, the strings ring on, and the chords that you picked are really, really beautiful, because as the notes add in, and I play more notes, they're still ringing, and it creates this sort of very beautiful effect with the strings emphasizing it even more. So shall we do the first few bars to show that?
Sure. Yes, so those notes are embraced by the rest of the orchestra as a kind of sonorous pad or cushion, and they reflect all of those harmonies. The next movement is called a cadenza, and a cadenza is, in most concerti, it comes near the end of the piece, and it's the opportunity for the soloist to really pull out all the stops, be very flashy, virtuosic, and show their mettle. And sometimes they're even rather improvisatory in nature. In this case, I separated the cadenza entirely from the rest of the concerto, and made the cadenza an element on its own, and it reflects the virtuosity of Erica in a completely different way from just being a flashy episode. And it's kind of, at times, very introspective, but it has kind of injections, declamatory statements that alternate a little bit with the atmospheric and introspective aspect of it. Erica, maybe you could show
Yes,
some
I
of
think
that.
I would like to demonstrate the end of it, where, shall we give it away or keep it a secret?
I think it's okay.
Okay, well, what happens is it's basically written out. I'm playing what's on the page, but when we get to the end, it kind of dissipates and becomes a little bit improvisatory in a controlled kind of way, because I am playing certain notes, but it just kind of loses its form, loses its rhythm, and just becomes something mellifluous that fades into the ether in the end.
Mm-hmm. It's a good thing an ambulance didn't drive by.
It does, but no, everybody seems to be well today, so.
Okay, and so then the last movement is called Salsalito. And this is a little bit of a kind of a cheeky title. I wrote the piece after I'd been to Sausalito in California. I just made a little play on words by adding ito to that, diminutive in Spanish. So it's a salsa, a little salsa. It's got Latin rhythms coming in and out of it, both in the orchestra and the harp. And at times it sounds like maybe there are even two bands overlapping, playing the same kinds of rhythms. The other thing about this movement is continually there are kind of false endings. So the piece you think has ended, but then it picks up again and goes on to another place where you think it's ended, but it hasn't, until it finally does end. So Erica, maybe you can find some of the kind of the Latin rhythmic things in there.
Yes, I'm going to play a portion that has some pedal slides in it.
Okay. Yes, and underneath that material, there's the rhythm section in the percussion, playing with maracas and bongos and things like that, and creating a pad, a rhythmic pad under it. This piece was written almost, I think, about 20 years ago, and we had occasion to play it several times then, and it's really a thrill for me to hear you working on it again, and I'm really looking forward to.
Thanks. And I'm going to work a
performance.
lot with the metronome between now and the performance. Well, I do love rhythm, and I think rhythm is just it's what makes the world go round, and what makes music go round too. I think, generally speaking, there's not enough attention paid to rhythm. I think it's, we think a lot about tone, interpretation, and all these things, but I think just straight basic rhythm is at the core of what we do.
And the thing about this piece also is that these rhythms are really finely interlocking with the orchestra in many places, and the demands of the orchestra, on the orchestra, to get those rhythms crisp and right also is required.
That's true. They have to come along with me.
Yeah, yeah. I'm really looking forward to this performance, Erica.
So am I, Alex.
Thanks for doing this.